Premier League Manager of the Season. Everybody is having their say, and today we are going to be having ours. But we go one step beyond on this channel, so why would we stop there? Today we're going to be ranking every Premier League manager this season. It's going to be a long one, so grab yourself a drink, grab yourself a snack, sit yourself down, like the video and subscribe, and let's rank every Premier League manager this season. Here we have our tier list. We have 5 categories to be ranking these managers in, and they start with complete disaster. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. It's been terrible. It's been awful. He needs to leave and possibly never return. Not mad, just disappointed. We're not mad at your performance. We're just extremely, extremely disappointed. You know, he's done all right. That's okay. We'll take it. We'll move on to the next season. Up, up and away, the Superman of the Premier League. If you know that reference, then that's fantastic. Up, up and away, they have done a fantastic job, and we look forward to more of this work next season. And then finally, we have managers of the season. Now, I put managers, and there's a big S here, because we like to indicate one manager as the manager of the season. It's the only one. You can only have one. I don't think that's the case. I think that's a little bit narrow-minded, and I'm perfectly fine if other people want to do it, but I like to look at the context. I like to look at the criteria, and I don't think it's fair to be able to justify one manager. So we're going to have a few. We're going to have a few managers of the season, and we're going to have a few complete disasters, I have a feeling. Right, so we have our tier list. We have our managers. Now, it is time to rank them. Where shall we begin? Where shall we begin? Let's begin with Roy Hodgson. This is in no particular order, but we've started off with the first one. Roy Hodgson. I think he's done all right. When you consider the fixtures that Crystal Palace had when Roy came back into the club, I think they were pretty favourable. I actually feel quite bad for Patrick Vieira in the sense that a lot of the teams they played were very, very good, and it made it difficult for them to really get either goals or points. But when Roy Hodgson did come in, I think he had a brilliant impact. So, I think he's done all right. Jurgen Klopp, and then we'll start mixing that up. Jurgen Klopp. I think we've got to be disappointed with Jurgen Klopp this season. I don't think he's got it right. I don't think he should have kept the players at Liverpool that he did. I think he's realised that now, and he needs to be ruthless. And for that reason, and that reason alone, I know they've had a very good end to the season, but really when you look at it, I don't think Jurgen Klopp can look at himself and say that he's had a decent season. I don't think he can. They've slipped way below the standards, and it's just not been good enough. So we're not mad, we're just disappointed. Let's now have a look at Erik ten Hag. When you consider what Erik ten Hag had to deal with at the start of the season, Cristiano Ronaldo, a complete mismatch of a squad, there was no harmony, there was no actual working team. And he's come in, he's won them at least a trophy. We don't know what's going to happen in the FA Cup at the current point of recording. And they look like they should be picking up 4th position. That can all change, of course, but generally I think they've had a pretty good season. And I think he's done very, very well in the circumstances, especially when you think about the Ronaldo situation, when you consider everything that he's had to deal with in terms of that. I think he handled that very well. I don't think anyone, especially I didn't think they'd be anywhere near the top 4. Yes, that is down to certain teams dropping off, but I think they still have to be there or thereabouts. And generally, I think Manchester United have had a pretty good season. I don't think you could really ask for too much more. So, Erik ten Hag is up, up and away. Let's have a look now at Marco Silva. Marco Silva, for me, is one of the managers of the season. We have to remember that Fulham were a promoted team. They got promoted, and they're in the top half of the table. They have done absolutely amazing. The football they play is exciting. They score goals. They're good at defending. And really, Fulham are the blueprint for what a promoted team should attempt to do. Whether they can match it in the second season, it's going to be far more difficult. But we need to remember that they have done a brilliant, brilliant job. And that means that Marco Silva was one of my managers of the season. Now let's have a look at Patrick Vieira. I think Patrick Vieira gets a little bit of a tough run here because I think his philosophy and I think the way he works things out is absolutely fine. I just believe that they hit a poor run of results, and I understand why Crystal Palace made the change. But I think if they'd have stuck with him, he might have been able to turn it around. That being said, they weren't scoring goals. They didn't score a goal for about 5 games. And they were dropping down the table like a rock. So for that reason, we're not mad, we're just disappointed. And there is a reason why we haven't put him in complete disaster. Hasn't been a disaster. I think they were doing okay, but it's been disappointing. Let's have a look at Unai Emery. I mean, he's done an absolutely sensational job in my opinion. And I will not hear anything else other than he is one of the managers of the season. To take Aston Villa, who were looking towards relegation. They were trying to go away from relegation. They were seriously underperforming, and Unai Emery has come in and been an absolute revelation, and it looks like Aston Villa are gunning for European football in the same season as being contended for relegation. Absolutely fantastic. Unai Emery has done a brilliant job. Now let's have a look at Graham Potter. Graham Potter, I have a bit of a soft spot for again. Brighton and everything going on at Chelsea, I think he was always destined to fail at Chelsea. I do. I don't think the players were ever going to listen to him. I don't think he was ever going to be given the time, evidently. And when you consider the amount of players that he had to deal with and the situation he had to deal with, it was a recipe for disaster. Is it a complete disaster what happened to Graham Potter? I'm not sure. I'm disappointed in the way that he tried to make everything work, but as a results basis, I suppose you could say it's a complete disaster. But at the same time, I think he's a good manager, and I'm disappointed in the fact that he couldn't get more from the players in the time that he was there. I do think he's a very good coach, but he needs time to be able to work with a squad, and Chelsea was just not the right fit. So for me, it was a disappointment, not a complete disaster. If we want to talk about complete disasters, we only need to look to one place, and that is Antonio Conte. Not only is the football that Tottenham played very bland, not only were the results nowhere near good enough, I'm not quite sure how he managed to get one half of a football match having his team play very well and one half just completely absent. He did that on numerous amounts of occasions, and I can't think how he's managed to do that. Not only that, but also the way he blew up Tottenham in that press conference. If you haven't seen it, please look up, after you've watched this video by the way, after you finish it, or you can open a second tab. Doesn't matter. Just have a look at the video. Have a look at the press conference, because it was something to behold. He actually blew up everything. It was incredible. And for that reason, I don't think you can have him be anything else other than a complete and utter disaster. Let's move on. Jesse Marsch. I understand a lot of Leeds fans don't like Jesse Marsch. I'm well aware of this. That being said, I think that after seeing Javi Gracia come in, and after seeing everything come on with Sam Allardyce and all of this, I think Jesse Marsch was just disappointing. I don't think it was a disaster. Yes, they struggled to stay up, but I think that was always going to happen due to the nature of the way they played and the way that everything really panned out. But with Jesse Marsch, I do think something was there. And a lot of people look at Jesse Marsch and think that because he's American, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I actually think he does. The problem is that they just shipped far too many goals, and the style of play wasn't necessarily that outlandish and that amazing. And once they started to drop, the Leeds hierarchy decided to make the move. And I don't think anybody really complained about that at the time. But now a lot of people are looking at it and saying if Jesse Marsch was still in the job, Leeds would be absolutely fine. I think it's just disappointing. I don't think it's a complete and utter disaster. However, if we're still talking about Leeds and complete and utter disasters, I do think that Javi Gracia was an absolute disaster. It just was awful. It was absolutely terrible. They've conceded more goals than they possibly could think of. They haven't been able to score. They haven't been able to play forwards. And in turn, he's managed to somehow alienate some of the teams. And that's just not good now, is it? It was a complete disaster from start to finish. Just nowhere near good enough. Roberto De Zerbi. He's obviously in one of these two categories, but whether he's one of the managers of the season, I'm not sure. He's got to be, hasn't he? He's got to be. Graham Potter left, and then De Zerbi comes in. But he plays such a clever brand of football in turn with the way that Graham Potter set up his team. And they've managed to get European football the first time in Brighton's history. And that alone is sensational. De Zerbi is one of the managers of the season for me. Steven Gerrard. I think for English people who really like Steven Gerrard, I think it's very easy to say he just disappointed. But I think it's more than that. I think it was a complete disaster. The fact that Unai Emery has been able to go into Aston Villa and turn that club around to such an effect, I think Steven Gerrard has had an absolute nightmare. He didn't get anything. And I believe when Aston Villa was sacked, they were 14th. That's just madness to think that Aston Villa are now gunning for European football. It's madness. Steven Gerrard had an absolute disaster for me at Aston Villa. Right. Scott Parker. Bournemouth. They got beat 9-0, didn't they? And then he came out in the press conference and said, or the post-match interview, and said that they just didn't have the resources to be able to compete. Well, that's clearly not the case, is it, Scotty? Is it? I just don't see where the acumen is. I just don't see it. It didn't work. And while he did a good job to get them up, I understand that. It was all good, all fine. But he crumbled too early, far too early. He crumbled far too early, and for that reason, I think it was a complete disaster. He didn't have faith in his team. He clearly didn't have faith in himself. And while I understand that a 9-0 drumming is something that really makes you look internally and really makes you think, am I the problem? I don't think he believed in his team, which is something that you just can't have. You really, really cannot have. Right, let's move on. Let's go to Brendan. Is it a complete disaster when you think about the circumstances that Leicester have had? Is it? Leicester are possibly, and seemingly likely at the point of recording, going to be relegated. With that team, is it a complete disaster? I think it might be. If you think that Leicester used to be Premier League champions within the last year, I think it is an absolute disaster to think that Brendan Rodgers has done so much to have them be taken down. He won an FA Cup with them. It is a disaster. It is an absolute disaster. Right, now, let's have a look at Gary O'Neill. Because we talk about Scott Parker and we talk about the way that he wants to play and the way that he really capitulated when speaking to the media after their 9-0. And Gary O'Neill had faith. I think he's done spectacular. I think he could be considered for one of the managers of the season. I really, really do. He's done unbelievably well. Everybody had Bournemouth down. Everybody. Scott Parker had Bournemouth down. It's seemingly so. Gary O'Neill has done a sensational job, and he's done it playing pretty good football as well. He's had faith in his team, and they've been safe before the last few games of the season. And that in itself is a fantastic performance. Right, let's now turn our attention to David Moyes. Now, because this is only a Premier League ranking video, I'm at a loss, because while West Ham should not be anywhere near relegation considering the level of player they have, they are in a European final, and do we need to take that into consideration? Let me know in the chat whether we need to take that into consideration. Let me know in the comments. Tell me, should we have taken this into consideration? And if so, how would you change it? But David Moyes, has he done all right? Premier League-wise, I don't think he has. I think he's disappointed, because they're close to the bottom of the table, and you can't have that as a West Ham fan. I know you might get European football and you might get some kind of win in the Europa Conference League, but can you really have that? I'm not so sure. And for that reason, I think it's disappointing. What is not disappointing, however, is the job that Steve Cooper has done. I think he's done pretty remarkable. Is he a manager of the season? I'm not so sure. Because I think that although he's done a fantastic job, and although Nottingham Forest will be absolutely elated with the fact that they've managed to stay up, they didn't do a great job to begin with. And I'm looking at all of the players that they managed to sign, and it did take Steve Cooper quite a bit of time to be able to find out his main 11. And even now, I'm not convinced that he knows it. I'm not convinced. I think they've done a fantastic job, and I'm very happy for Nottingham Forest, and I think they've done brilliantly. But I don't think it can be contender for a manager of the season. So he's up and away. I think he's done a fantastic job. Let's not get that twisted. Now, let's have a look at who do we go for next? Frank Lampard. Was Everton a disaster? It is a disaster if they get relegated for the Premier League, I believe. I don't think Frank Lampard was a complete disaster, though. I don't think he's a good manager in either Chelsea or Everton, for that matter. Is it a complete disaster? Is it? It has to be, I suppose, really, doesn't it? It really does need to be considered that, because when you're thinking about what he did, I don't think he's had a win in 19 matches. And Everton have started to slip, and obviously they're now dicing with relegation. Yeah, okay, it's a complete disaster. Fine. Fair enough. Now, let's move on to Ralph Hasenhüttl. Now, I think it's disappointing. I think Southampton sacked him far too early. And perhaps we need to be speaking about Southampton as a club in general, having 3 managers and really not knowing where they want to turn. The investment was a little bit strange. It was a little bit odd. But I think they sacked him too early. Yes, he was disappointing. Yes, of course. They were going towards the relegation zone. It didn't start off very well. And once the dark spiral started hovering above their heads, it was difficult to look elsewhere. But I think, had they kept Hasenhüttl, I think they might have been safe. I really do. I think he's got enough about him, and the other managerial appointments that they made, we'll be getting to those later, don't worry. But the other managerial appointments that they made, I don't think were anywhere near the calibre of Hasenhüttl. Yes, he's been on the end of bad drummings. Yes, I understand that, but I don't think he's a bad coach. And I think he might have kept them up. That might be a bit of hindsight, but I think he might have kept them up. Right. He's just been amazing. Thomas Frank is fantastic. Brentford, no, we don't talk enough about Brentford. Brentford are just out here living life. They're just living life to their fullest. They're going up, up and away. The fact that Brentford are in the top half of the table is mind-blowing. Ivan Toney and that whole problem and issue, yes, is going to be a thing later down the line. But at the moment, Brentford are just a phenomenon. Really, they are. They're absolutely brilliant. Now, let's have a look at the likes of Thomas Tuchel. I don't think Thomas Tuchel did anything wrong. I really don't. And if it wasn't for his points that he got on the board for Chelsea before he was sacked, that's a completely different topic. Before he was sacked by Todd Bowley, I think he was fine. I don't think he did anything wrong. I really don't. He's done alright. Don't think he's had a lot of the season to be able to be judged off, but he's done alright, I think. As has Sean Dyche. I don't think you can look at the job that Sean Dyche has done and think that it's anything special, but I also don't think you can think it's disappointing. Because of the position that Everton found themselves in, I just don't see where else he could have gone. They don't have a striker, they don't have a way of going forwards, and he's made them fairly difficult to beat. So, if he does keep them up, it's a great achievement, but generally, I think he's done okay. Now, let's have a look at another manager of the season contender, and it has to be Eddie Howe. It has to be. Eddie Howe has absolutely played a blinder. Newcastle have made Champions League football for the first time in 20 years. I've actually got a video up on how they did it. If you'd like to go check that out, that would be very much appreciated. But he has done an absolutely sensational job. He's made that team greater than the sum of its parts. And for that reason alone, it's sensational. But to beat clubs like Tottenham 6-1 in such a convincing manner, with the players that he has, the football is electric at times. The defensive capabilities are nigh on flawless. They have one of the best defensive records, if not the best defensive record in the Premier League. I think they're only up there with Man City. He's just unbelievable. And Champions League football will pose its different or a different challenge. But at the moment, Eddie Howe has to be one of the managers of the season. A person who is not the manager of the season, though, is this man. Nathan Jones. Now, we speak about Southampton. This is the second of their 3 managers that they have in this list. I just don't have words to describe the absolute disaster that Nathan Jones was. I think he had 14 games in charge, I believe. 14. And he was just woeful, wasn't he? It's not necessarily his fault, but for that reason, I'm not putting it in disappointed, because it's more than disappointed. It is a disaster, and he didn't manage to get anything out of this group of Southampton players, which the third Southampton manager has been able to do to a certain extent. They have been relegated, but I'd argue they were relegated on Nathan Jones's watch. Perhaps more on Hasenhüttl's, but mostly here, because I just think he created such a negative atmosphere. The fans wanted him gone, and he thought so much of himself to say that he was one of the best coaches in Europe. Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Just nowhere near for me. Nowhere near. A complete disaster. Dean Smith. I don't think... It's difficult. They let Brendan go too early, I feel. And at that point, the rot had set in. So I think it was difficult for Dean Smith to even contemplate trying to do something. Do I think he's a great manager? I'm not so sure. Do I think that, given more time, would he been able to keep Leicester up? Possibly. But we also have to remember that Leicester's fixtures were quite favourable, and he has disappointed somewhat. I do think he could have done a little bit more. Bruno Lage was a disappointment. I don't think that he's done a very good job with Wolves, or I don't think he did a very good job. He was sacked, and Wolves were bottom of the table at one point, and considering the calibre of the squad that Wolves have, that is horrendous. And it just hasn't been nowhere near good enough. Speaking of Wolves, though, we have Julian Lopetegui, who has done absolutely fantastic. Now, if it wasn't for the calibre of the squad, I would say he's one of the managers of the season. However, the calibre of the squad is very good, and Wolves should be nowhere near the bottom of the table. So, for that reason, I think he's done an absolutely fantastic job. But he should be, really, with the quality of players. They still can't score goals, though, and that is going to be a big question mark. And another question mark over his head next season is going to be whether the Wolves hierarchy are able to give him any funds to be able to sign any players, because if they don't, I have a feeling that he might be gone. But that is a topic for a different video. If you'd like to hear me talk about that, let me know in the comments section below. But we are left down to 4. Stellini. I actually don't think he's got too much to be blamed for. I don't think he's done alright at all. I think he's been a disappointment. But it's more on Tottenham the fact that they appointed him than anything else. And when you're Conte's right-hand man, would you not be a little bit loyal? I don't know what Daniel Levy said to him to keep him staying, but when Conte went out in a blaze of glory, or Conte's blaze of glory, I don't understand why Stellini stayed. I don't understand why Daniel Levy decided to keep him around when you knew he would be playing the same brand of football that Conte would be playing. So it's all very, very crazy. I don't think he's been an absolute disaster. I just think it's more Conte. And Conte is Conte, and Conte decided to blow everything up, which is why he's the complete disaster. Disappointing. I don't think he had the impact that I think he expected to have, and I don't think he had the impact that Tottenham or anyone expected him to have. So, but then again, why would we expect any different? It's all a bit confusing. He's disappointing. Ruben Sellers has been disappointed. Do you know what? He's done alright, actually. I think he's done okay. Considering where Southampton were at the time and considering where they were going when Nathan Jones was sacked, I actually think that you saw a revival out of Southampton. He got them playing. He got them emotional. Was it too late? Yes. But some of the wins that they had were huge. The win against Chelsea away from home was fantastic. They played very well. They got some kind of response from the rest of their team. And for that reason, I think he's done okay. Yes, he's been relegated with them. Yes, it's not good enough. Yes, should it be a disappointment? Probably. But overall, I think considering the impact, considering the fact that he hasn't really been a manager, I think he's been fine, really. I think he's been okay. And then there were 2. If you're here for the end of this video, thank you, because it's been a long one. But hopefully we've had some fun along the way. Mikel Arteta, I think, is one of the managers of the season. I really do. In fact, I think both of them are managers of the season. We're going to be talking about them differently. Mikel Arteta has taken an Arsenal side who finished in 5th in complete disarray, disappointment, and got them challenging for the Premier League title. That is unbelievable. Genuinely, absolutely ridiculous. And frankly, some of the football that Arsenal have played this season has been the best in the league, bar none. Just unreal. And if they can take that into next season, who knows what Arsenal are able to achieve. Did they fall short? Yes. Did they crumble a little bit towards the end once the heads dropped? Yes. But I don't think any Arsenal fan is going to forget the feeling that they had once they realised it could happen. And that feeling of elation and that feeling of hope is really all you can ask from a manager in your season. And Mikel Arteta gave that in abundance with this Arsenal team. And for that reason, I think with the brand of football they were playing and the levels that they have raised, considering they only needed Champions League football, but you had a title chase in there as well, I think he's done absolutely amazing. So is this man, who is also one of the managers of the season. Could he be the manager of the season? Probably. Could he be really up there? Probably. Yes. His football is electric. His play is sensational. His just man management is brilliant. The fact that he got rid of arguably one of the best fullbacks in the world in Joao Cancelo is fantastic, and he made it work. Nathan Ake as a left back. You've got the likes of John Stones coming into midfield. He's reinventing the game on a season-by-season basis, and he's just an enigma. I don't understand how he's doing it. He thinks about football differently, much like De Zerbi, actually. I think De Zerbi is in the same mould, not in the same level, but in the same mould. And Pep Guardiola is by far one of the best managers in the world, if not the best manager in the world currently. And how can he not be manager of the season, or one of the managers of the season, when he's won the Premier League? Just unbelievable. This is my tier list. This is my ranking of Premier League managers. Again, it's a little bit skewed because of the whole managers of the season thing. You didn't have one overall manager. But I suppose if you were going to pick one, I suppose you could have picked Pep Guardiola. I suppose. Actually, no. Scrap that. No, it's not going to be Pep Guardiola. No. We're going to be picking Eddie Howe, actually. Eddie Howe. Because of the achievement that Newcastle made, they've gone from 10th to 3rd. Think about that. 10th to 3rd. In one season, considering it's not necessarily a lack of investment, but considering the fact that he didn't spend all that much, when you think about the owners that they have, he didn't spend all that much, and the level of performance that he's gotten out of this team is sensational. Eddie Howe for me. If you want to pick Pep, then pick Pep, but Eddie Howe for me. This is my ranking. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below on who you would have in these separate tiers. Tell me why you would change things, and again, it's just a little bit of fun, it's just a bit subjective, so let's get talking. Get down in the comment section below and tell me who your managers of the season are and who your complete disasters are. Tell me why as well. I have fun reading them, so please do tell me why. That is my ranking. Thank you. Thank you ever so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave the video with a like and subscribe. It really, really would mean a lot to me. If you would like to support the channel a little bit more, you can do. You can become a channel member. In doing this, you get a whole host of perks, including member badges and exclusive member videos. If this is something you're interested in, then click that join button just below the video or on the main channel. Follow the instructions and become a club member. And as always, all of your support is very, very much appreciated. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below on any changes you would make to my ranking list, and tell me why. Where would you have what manager? Let's get this conversation going. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. That is it for me for today. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope to see you in the next one. But until then, my friends, take care of yourselves and bye-bye.